Polar vortex refers to a large, persistent low-pressure area found in the upper atmosphere of the Earth, typically centered over the Arctic and Antarctic regions. It consists of cold, dense air circulating around the poles, often in the stratosphere. The term polar vortex is most commonly associated with the northern hemisphere, especially the Arctic polar vortex, but the southern hemisphere also has its own polar vortex centered over Antarctica. Structure and function. The polar vortex is a feature of the Earth's atmosphere, specifically the stratosphere, a layer of the atmosphere above the troposphere. It is essentially a vast area of cold air, and during the winter months, it tends to be more defined and stronger, creating a stark contrast between the colder air near the pole and the warmer air further south. The vortex is shaped by a variety of factors, including the Earth's rotation and temperature differences between the polar region and lower latitudes. The polar vortex itself is not a singular entity, but a region of strong cyclonic winds that encircle the Arctic or Antarctic poles. These winds help to trap cold air within the vortex, keeping it contained in the polar regions. The vortex is typically strongest during the winter months, when the temperature contrast between the poles and the equator is the greatest. Movement and behavior. Normally, the polar vortex is relatively stable, circulating cold air around the Arctic or Antarctic regions. However, it can sometimes become disturbed or weakened, leading to significant weather events. A weakened or displaced polar vortex can result in cold air spilling out of the polar regions and moving toward lower latitudes, particularly affecting North America, Europe, and parts of Asia in the northern hemisphere. This intrusion of frigid air is what we often refer to as a polar vortex event. A weakened or displaced vortex may occur due to several factors. Sudden stratospheric warming, SSW. This is a phenomenon where the stratosphere near the polar region experiences a rapid warming. When this warming occurs, it can disrupt the polar vortex, weakening the winds that keep the cold air trapped within the vortex. This allows the cold air to escape and travel southward, causing extreme cold weather in places that don't typically experience it. Atmospheric waves and jet stream shifts. Changes in the upper atmosphere can affect the behavior of the polar vortex. The jet stream, a fast-moving ribbon of air high in the atmosphere, plays a key role in shaping weather patterns. If the jet stream becomes undulating or meandering, it can allow pockets of cold polar air to move farther south. Effects on weather. When the polar vortex is displaced or weakened, cold air can travel much farther south than usual, leading to extreme cold spells in regions that are usually warmer. Some of the effects of a displaced polar vortex include 1. Extreme cold in the northern hemisphere. The most significant and direct consequence of a displaced or weakened polar vortex is the intrusion of extremely cold air into mid-latitude areas. For example, parts of the US or Europe might experience abnormally cold temperatures, leading to winter storms, freezing conditions, and disruptions to daily life. 2. Winter storms. The cold air associated with the displaced polar vortex can interact with other weather systems, creating snowstorms, blizzards, or ice storms. These weather patterns can result in hazardous conditions, including travel disruptions, power outages, and frostbite or hypothermia risks for exposed individuals. 3. Temperature extremes. The influx of polar air often leads to temperature records being broken, with some regions experiencing extreme lows that are several degrees colder than the typical winter minimums. Recent polar vortex events. Polar vortex events have been a subject of significant media attention in recent years due to their severe impacts. Notable instances of polar vortex events include 2014 polar vortex event. In early 2014, a major polar vortex event caused a significant cold wave in the U.S., particularly in the Midwest and the East Coast. This event led to a drastic drop in temperatures, with some places seeing record-breaking cold. 2019 polar vortex event. In February 2019, a polar vortex event brought bitterly cold temperatures to the central United States, with places like Chicago experiencing temperatures well below -20 degrees Fahrenheit, -29 degrees Celsius. This event led to dangerous wind chills and widespread school and business closures. global implications. While the polar vortex is most commonly associated with the northern hemisphere, its counterpart in the southern hemisphere, the Antarctic polar vortex, behaves similarly, but is generally stronger due to the geography and climate of Antarctica. In summary, the polar vortex is a large area of cold, swirling air around the poles, with its behavior having a significant impact on weather patterns.